What if you could have a master blueprint for how your mind works? I mean, not just the individual parts, but a real plan for how everything, your thoughts, your feelings, your identity, all fits together. Well, that's exactly what we're exploring today. We're diving into the psychological architecture framework created by RJ Starr. It's this incredible model that connects our mind, our emotions, our identity, and our sense of purpose into one single coherent system. So let's get into it.
Okay, here's our game plan. First, we're going to look at why psychology even needs a new model in the first place. Then, we'll get into the master blueprint itself. We'll break down its 4 core components, see what happens when the whole system goes off the rails, and finally, look at how we can use this to build a stronger, more integrated self.
All right, let's kick things off with the core problem that Professor Starr's really trying to solve here. Why does psychology so often feel like a bunch of disconnected ideas?
I mean, think about it, right? You hear about cognitive biases over here, emotional intelligence over there. Then there's attachment theory, identity crisis. But how does it all actually link up? It can feel like you've got a ton of puzzle pieces, but no picture on the box to show you how they fit.
And this is where a quote from RJ Starr just hits the nail on the head. He says that psychology has all these powerful local maps, super detailed guides to specific areas like memory or emotion. But what it's missing is that unified blueprint, the big picture that shows how all those maps connect into a single world.
So that brings us right to the solution, the master blueprint. This is RJ Starr's answer to that exact problem of fragmentation.
What we're talking about today is this psychological architecture framework. It's a truly original structural model of how we function, and its whole purpose is to integrate the 4 foundational domains of our experience: our mind, our emotions, our identity, and our sense of meaning.
Now here's a really key idea to grasp. Professor Starr's framework isn't here to throw out other theories, not at all. It's a system-level perspective. Think of it like this. It's not inventing a new kind of brick. It's providing the architectural plan for the entire house. The focus isn't just on the parts in isolation, but on the relationships between them, how they align, or sometimes how they misalign.
So, let's break this system down. Let's look at the 4 foundational pillars, the 4 domains of our inner world.
First up, you've got the mind. This is basically our sense-making machine. It's the part of you that's constantly building models of reality, trying to explain what's happening and predict what's going to happen next. It's our inner storyteller.
Next, there's emotion. And this is so much more than just feelings. It's our internal signaling system. Your emotions are data. They flag what's important, what's urgent, and they're what guide your attention and motivate you to act.
The third pillar is identity. This is the story we tell ourselves about ourselves. It's that running narrative that gives us a coherent sense of me, the same me yesterday, today, and tomorrow, whether you're at work, with family, or by yourself.
And finally, we have meaning. You can think of this as our internal compass. It's what allows us to zoom out and see the big picture. It integrates all our experiences into a framework of purpose and direction. It's our why. Okay, now this is probably the most crucial takeaway from RJ Starr's work. These 4 domains are not separate departments. They are a deeply interconnected system. A change in one creates ripples through all the others. A crisis of meaning can totally scramble your emotional state. A shift in your thinking can reshape your identity. They are constantly influencing and constraining each other.
So this leads us to a really fascinating and practical part of the framework. What happens when the system breaks? What does it look like when the alignment between these domains gets warped or distorted?
To really see this in action, we can use one of Professor Starr's dynamic models. Just think of these as blueprints for common ways the system can get stuck in an unhealthy pattern, especially when it's under stress. Let's walk through a really classic example.
Okay, check this out. The emotional avoidance loop. It starts when a really tough emotion comes up. Let's say you feel rejected after a conversation. That's step 1. But instead of letting yourself feel it, your mind jumps in to rationalize, saying, "Oh, they were just busy. It wasn't personal." That's step 2. Then your identity shifts to protect itself. I'm the kind of strong person who doesn't get bothered by things like that. Step 3. And finally, your sense of meaning narrows to seal the deal. It's just better to not get too close to people anyway. Step 4. You see that? It becomes this vicious, self-reinforcing cycle. And here's the trade-off, right? The punchline. In the short term, you feel stable. You avoided the pain. But what you've actually done is weakened the long-term integration of your entire psychological structure, making it more brittle and fragile down the road.
So if that's how the architecture breaks, how do we build it stronger? That brings us to our final section.
the path to psychological integration. To help us understand this path, RJ Starr gives us something called the Emotional Maturity Index. Now, this is not a test where you get a score. Think of it as a spectrum. On the left, you have a less developed structure, where emotions are overwhelming, the mind is rigid and defensive, and identity is fragile. On the right, you have a highly integrated structure, where you can experience and regulate emotions. Your mind is flexible and open to new data, and your sense of self is both strong and adaptable. The journey of growth is all about moving from left to right.
And this points to such a critical idea. The goal isn't to become a rigid, unfeeling fortress. That's not strength. Real psychological strength is about dynamic alignment. It's having the flexibility to bend with life's challenges without breaking. It's like a tree that's deeply rooted but can still sway in the wind.
And that brings us to the ultimate takeaway from Professor Starr's work, which is the difference between mere coherence and true integration. See, coherence is just having a story that makes internal sense, but that story can be really rigid, like a brick wall. Integration, on the other hand, is coherence plus flexibility. It's having that strong, consistent sense of self, but also having the capacity to learn, adapt, and grow. It's less like a brick wall and more like a strong, living trellis that can support new growth.
So the powerful idea this framework leaves us with is that every single one of us has a psychological architecture. There's no escaping it. And the real question it poses is this: what does your blueprint look like? Where is it strong and flexible, and where might it be a little rigid? It's a really powerful lens for starting to understand ourselves on a much, much deeper level.